So if I'm looking at my camera, it's going to be the most human looking to people at home, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Looking at you on my screen, and then it looks like
that's it, man. I mean, this is just I mainly put it up here on Twitch because it's easy for me to tear it down, and then I put it up on my YouTube and things like that. But it's mainly for the podcast platform. As I see, we are coming to live here at twitch.tv, so we'll be good to go here in just about 3, 2. Yes, that's right. HahaHamin.podbean.com, RussosBrand.com, infidels. It's HahaHamin. We're back, and it's right. The king of the lowlifes is here. You infidel morons, there's nothing left for you to do because you might bleed a little while tonight because there'll be no peace and quiet for you here with HahaHamin and the king himself, Ron Hawkins. We might do some $5 face slaps and leave your cheeks rosy and gray here at HahaHamin. YOLO. Yes, we're back, you guys. And another high-level, super pumped guest. And it's a real honor to have him here, that he granted us some time. We had a great guest with TJ Jagodowski last week, and we're following up with another heavy hitter from Toronto, Ron Hawkins, lead frontman for Lowest of the Low. Welcome, man.
How you been?
Yeah, dude, working hard in the gym. I got a match coming up on Saturday in Welland, Ontario. So tables, ladders, and chairs match. So I don't know how you really trained to fall off a ladder. So we'll see how that goes. And then I got to defend my title the weekend after in New York. So yeah, man, it's on the road. It's crazy. I don't have to tell you, you put in tons and tons of miles on the road, man.
Yeah, and strangely enough, been involved in a few chair fights at some shows.
Yo, yeah. Did you take or were you given the chair shots?
Well, I watched a lot from the stage. I don't know if you've ever heard the story, but we used to be David from the Low, David the drummer in the Low. We used to be in a band called Social Insecurity, which was like a Marxist punk rock band. And because we were so popular and brought a bunch of people out, the promoters would put us with other punk rock bands that were popular and brought a lot of people out, no matter what their political stripe was. So often we'd be in the room, all these lefties, all these Nazis, and, stir, rinse, and repeat, right? So every show, some kind of fight would break out, some kind of brawl, some kind of chair fight. And it was usually us and the mods and, whatever, the two-tone kids all sort of battling Nazis. So
it's the real life version of SLC Punk in Toronto, pretty much, right? I mean, everything you just described is right out of that movie. Everyone trying to find their little teenage angst voice at the time, and practicing their politics early on, and it manifested itself in the launch of your music career. I mean, the Propaganda sticker is legendary on your guitar, and that was kind of probably a big inspiration for you guys at that time too.
Yeah, and I think it's that kind of thing where, I think when Propaganda became, they became fans of Lowest of the Low. And to me, the politics in the early Lowest of the Low songs are, they're embedded in sort of real life stories. They're not really propaganda kinds of capital P politics in the songs, but, you can sort of sense it. You can sort of generally get the gist of where people are at, And I think that's what they did with us, and they covered Gamble on a record of theirs, and then we became friends, and I would see them every time. Actually, I mostly saw them with my band Rusty Nails because we were traveling. By the time we were friends, I was in Rusty Nails traveling across Canada. So that was kind of cool. But I know they're in the same boat, right? Like lots of neo-Nazis will show up at their shows and stuff, and it seems weird. It seems like a dream to talk about it. It seems like you're talking about a movie, but in fact, it has been real life,
Right. It does seem manufactured, but even in Canada, and I'm not trying to besmirch anybody's movement there, but, everyone is so nice compared to even in New York, how hardcore it is. Like when you say that, like the neo-Nazi Canadian version is just like still a fairly polite person to some degree, which is funny to me, like you have this goose stepping image, in your mind or down south in everyone's in a militia or whatever it's going on, white supremacy. But up there, if the hockey puck drops, I think everybody comes and turns their head no matter what they are.
Could be, yeah. That's probably true.
And your music serves the same purpose because if you aren't familiar, you guys, you're going to get familiar with a band that for me is everything. There's two groups that I really mark out for still after being in this entertainment biz for my 30th year, which is why I'm doing this series, is to go back to my roots and kind of cover everything I did. And since 1995, you guys have been a part of my life when I went to school at Fredonia, you know, right across the border. And there's this bubble, and my wrestling audience will know this because we use this phrase, the bubble, a lot. Usually it's to keep ignorant people inside of something clueless, but this is a bubble of music that is kind of nice of an underground between Buffalo area, Niagara, and really reaches all the way to Upper Canada, Nova Scotia, you know, of this Toronto sound. And it's born of people living on a lake and shoveling a shitload of snow. And there was also a time where real musicianship in that early renaissance of the 90s and coming out of the politics of the late 80s was a perfect blend. And there was a lot of really great music in there that people are unaware of. I mean, bands like Bare Naked Ladies may have broken out and gone more commercial, but they were part of that. Moxie Fruvis, which is a very, you know, French-Canadian harmonic band, you know, but they would also do political things. Lowest of the Low was there. Obviously, Tragically Hip was another big name. And then across the bridge in Buffalo, you had the Goo Goo Dolls, who were a very punk sound early on, and then totally changed their look to fit a label sound and made a lot of money that way. But there was a lot.
What happened, man? What happened?
Yeah, dude.
We played with those guys at the Armory,
yeah,
in Buffalo, and like, I guess it was 90. I'm going to guess it was 92 or something like that. And they were unbelievable. It was like playing with the Clash or something. And then something happened, and I don't know what happened, but
they signed that record deal, which is what you not have avoided, but I'm sure have been offered plenty of times and have kept the integrity of an independent artist, which is something I'm very interested in. You know, as I am an independent wrestler, my character is very hot button to put on TV in a commercial way. And, you know, you've really kept that integrity and made an unbelievable career and name for yourself in there. I'd like to hear your opinion on being an independent artist like that.
Yeah, well, we often had talked about, you know, when we first came out and had sold a bunch of records in Toronto, I think people want to grab a hold of you and slap all these labels on you. And we would get like indie freedom fighters and, you know, local heroes and blah, blah, blah. And we would say, you know, yeah, cool. Like, we're willing to take that mantle on because it fits a lot of our worldview. But that's not to say that we didn't try to get signed by every label in Toronto. You know, we wanted to have it easier than we had it, which is like, we want somebody to pay for it, you know, and help us get it out there. But nobody wanted to touch us with a 10-foot pole. And it's kind of woven in there. I think the reason they didn't want to touch us was partially because of the same reason that we're an indie band, you know? And it's like, we tried to stuff ourselves a round peg into a square hole for a while. Mm-hmm. And it just never fit. And so we did it on our own for a while, and we sold a whole bunch of records. Like, I think we got up to like 8,000 or 9,000 records on our own. Like, we were literally out of the back of the van kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then all these labels that couldn't give a shit and didn't want us, you know, suddenly started calling us and everything. And we sniffed around for the second record for Lucid Genie, and we wound up actually signing a production and distribution deal with Universal. So we weren't on their label per se, but our boutique label was distributed by them.
Right.
And even that, you know, that we wound up, it worked on some level and it didn't work on a lot of levels. And we wound up exploding. I mean, the band exploded and broke up. And I don't want to put all that at the feet of Universal Records, but it certainly didn't help. It was really a grinding machine. And it was everything that all the cliches you would think. They were sort of grinding you out, not really quite getting the band, putting us back out in positions we'd been out in a million times. Mm-hmm. Where we had to choose, like, you know, we have this grassroots audience that we want to serve them, right? We have new songs. We want to make a new record. They want to send us back out to support Shakespeare in My Butt because they can still wring a few bucks out of it, right? So a lot of those scenarios came up where it just didn't suit us. And so we realized, oh yeah, we're just, that's the clothes that fit us best is the indie thing. And we'll just go do that. Well, the band broke up anyway. And I went on and did a bunch of other indie stuff. And then Lowest of the Low came back and we released some records on our own. And now we've dipped our toe back in with Lowest of the Low with Warner Canada. And it's been a much better fit. And I think partially because the whole fucking ship is going down. So even the major labels feel like indies now, right? Like everybody, right. Like, they're not worried about, you know, like back in the day, they'd hand us a 700-page fucking J.R. Tolkien contract. You know, you have to go through and speak some kind of weird elven language to figure it out.
Right.
And now it's a 2-page deal memo. You know, you guys are going to make a record. We're going to try and fucking sell some of them, and we'll see, you know, we'll break up the money somehow. Done.
Yeah, I think at this point in your career, with your, you know, your entire discography of what you've done on your own, the next record is something to look forward to, but it's really about, now let's go and see all of our fans, where you put in all those road miles, and let it be on the big labels back in time to do that. I think you've more than earned that. And it's not, at this point, no one would consider that a sellout move, you know, because what is there left to do, you know, to prove the worth, man.
And there's guy you probably know from Toronto called George Strombolopoulos, who's, you know, his bona fides are unquestionable. He's been in the business since the new music, and then, you know, like, he's just an amazing music head, and he's the right guy in the broadcasting industry in Canada. And he referred to Steve Kane, who's the president of Warner, as the last punk rock president, because Steve is the real deal. Like, Steve, you know, actually there was a couple of songs that the band was kicking around for Agit Pop. I wanted to put them on, and a couple of the band members weren't sure that they liked the message that was being sent. And it was actually the president of Warner was like, no, man, the Barricade has to go on there, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like, it's weird to have the president arguing for the, you know, the brick throwing song, you know?
Well, I mean, that's if you're going to test it, and, you know, I'm very involved in marketing and the other side of my career, which pays for the crazy wrestling and creative side. You know, so if they're going to market the revolution, and, you know, anything from a Black Lives Matter movement all the way through, you know, to Second Amendment, not to say this guy's selling out, but I know your music is going back now to that more aggressive 93 mentality that really you came out of the punk scene and shaped Lowest of the Low. So it was kind of Agit Pop is definitely a revisit to that, you guys. And I totally suggest you get it. I got the big version here.
There it is.
The big vinyl. I actually moved back instead of that. So
that's the biggest MP3 I've ever seen in my life.
I got the turntable set up too, but it was good to grab all that merch from you, you know, with that fake money that I had up there in Canada. It was very kind. That was a really a banner moment for me, because I've seen you in Fredonia at BJ's. This is what I wanted to get back to your fans in the low lives, because it was cool it's been cool for me to interact with them, man. And I want to hear your take on your fan base, because I have to treat everyone like shit as a heel in my thing, you know, and it's fun. And if I don't break character, they respect it more, and I can be witty and unpredictable, right, and super insulting, and it's great. All my Don Rickles stuff comes out. So, but you have kind of this Buffalo bro culture where they want to do, you know, the Rosie and Grace sing along, and they know Alex never gets what she wants, and that kind of stuff. And I've seen you at the pier there, 6,000 to 10,000 person draw. I saw you at the Only. You put me on the guest list for 40 people packed into a little coffee house setting, man. The scope and range of who you play for. I was looking around, and I know that that's your tight knit group. I'm like, these chicks have been down since 95. I look at them now. They're, you know, the late 40s, early 50s. I'm like, they still look good. I was looking around. I was like, dude, I imagined her in 95. She was tearing it up out here in Toronto on the streets, bro. But they're still so loyal because the sound is so pure. But and even you haven't interacted with me today. It's weird to have probably a fan like me, and then the Smith brothers, you know, who are the hardcores there. You've got a pretty wide range of people that you bring together through your music.
Right. Well, I mean, not to shit on the Goo Goo Dolls all day, but I, you know, just the assumption I make when I see a band that I played with, like those guys at the Armory, and then the next time I saw them was probably on some video show, and my brain was just having a hard time doing the math. And I guess that's a trajectory that's a bit of a cliche as well, which is that, you know, you slog it out, you do it all for the right reasons. You've got a fan base, you're loyal to that fan base. And then certain things in life come up, certain options that you have. And it's like, you know, it's not their fault that the system is wired that way. The system is wired to, I mean, look at how even just the economic system for people trying to live is now, which is that your choices are becoming find a way to become a multi-billionaire or have 3 jobs and try and fucking scrape by and make a living. So there used to be a bigger middle ground, right? And I think the same with music is that for a lot of kids who start in bands, a lot of them start for the right reasons, or a lot of them, a lot of them want to be rock stars, but at the same time, they also want to have a real commitment. They want to write some songs that really touch people and change their lives in the way that the musicians they listen to change their lives, right? And that's how they start out. And then they see this and they see that, and maybe if we do this, we get there, and maybe if we just make this compromise, we get there, and then we get the bus, and then we do this, and then everything gets a little easier. And then there's some kind of a myth that you just sell out up front a little bit and then you can do whatever you want. But I think it's been proven over and over and over again that when you make the big compromises to sell out early so that you can do what you want later, what you want turns out to be more selling out and just more acquiring and more accumulating. So we shot ourselves in the foot so many times. Well, as people call it, shooting ourselves in the foot. I mean, a classic one in Canada is that we had a big industry showcase for all the labels when we were going to make our second Low record, and our manager set it all up, and he was, did a lot of work, and this was a step forward and everything. And we were out on the road, and we were in some little punk rock record store, and we saw these SS t-shirts that said things like "Don't suck corporate cock" and "Corporate rock still sucks." And I look at that, and I can't remember if it was me or Steve. Somebody said, "We got to buy these for our industry. We got to wear these at our industry show," right? And so, of course, something like that is just wildfire in our band, because it was like it just went around. Everybody's like, "Oh yeah." So we bought the shirts. We came back. I'm not sure we told our manager or not, but we wore them at the industry show. And then the idea for us made total sense, which is that anybody who doesn't think this is funny, or at least can understand why we would do it and get a bit of a chuckle out of it, is going to be something that every day it's going to be a problem with that person, right?
We don't want to work with them anyway, right?
Yeah, if we don't get this, then every single day of our life is going to be a nightmare. So we might as well just sift out all the people that don't get it right off the bat. And so we did, and it left very few people. And we did what we did. And so there's some people in Toronto. There's a wonderful promoter. She's given her life to the Toronto music scene. Her name is Yvonne Matzel. She'll tell you to this day, she goes, "I think that's dogging you to this day. The fact that you guys did that. It set up a thing in people's minds about how you guys are, and you're difficult, and you're blah, 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 blah." And it's like, for me, that's all fine. It's like, it helped us. We made the decisions we made, and we owned them. And sure, of course, they cut off all kinds of avenues to us, but they're not avenues we would have enjoyed going down anyway. Mm. And as my daughter, there's another thing, is like Molson Canadian tried to weirdly.
Wow, I was gonna, that's on the list, man. You told that story at the Only Show. Could you tell that?
Yeah, they wanted to license Salesmen, Cheats, and Liars off Shakespeare and About. And of course, back in the day, in the 90s, nobody I knew would ever sell their music to commercials, right? And now I don't think I know anybody who wouldn't, because as I say, this sort of survival mode, everybody's in survival mode. And it's like, people will hear my song, I'll make a little dosh, and, we'll get on with my life. But back then, we were like, screw you. We just told them flat out, no way. And I think it started at 70 grand or something, 75 grand. And we were, like, for instance, to put it in perspective, I was living in this little flop house punk rock squat, and I was, we would make a big pot of soup, and we would live on that soup for a week, right? And I'd go out and tour and do stuff and come back, and we would eat the soup, right? Because we had no money. But even though we had no money, like this little dangling carrot, we were able to sort of fight it off. And then every few months they would come back and they would up it by, 10 grand, 20 grand. And it got over 100 grand. And we still had the, whatever it is, the stupidity or the balls or the wherewithal to say, fuck you guys. I don't even think you're listening to the lyrics, but, and so we never ever did that. And my daughter, I think when she was maybe 9, I was telling her this story, and she said, "Well, Dad," she said, "now you guys would have spent all that money anyway, and you wouldn't know even what you spent it on, but you would know that you didn't feel good about the fact that you let your music be used in that commercial." And I'm like, where did this kid come from? Offspring of mine. Yeah. And it sums it up perfectly. Like, that's what I think. You would be left with all of the regret and none of the money.
Right.
I'd love to get in the heads of some of these people. And again, not just the Goo-Goos, but to talk to anybody who's made some decisions they're maybe not sure about it now or whatever, just sort of say, okay, now you're 50, or now you're, whatever age you are. And like, so how does that feel? Is that a regret, or is that did it open doors for you? I don't know. I can't say there's any one trajectory for anybody, right? Maybe it does open some doors for some people. It works. Maybe other people it doesn't. I just know for me, it wouldn't. be the.
I spent a little time with them because of with Dave Fridman at Fredonia. I was doing
Oh,
sound engineering there, so I would go up to the real studio up there, and that was after they had kind of done it, and I saw them then, and it was still kind of just guys hanging out. But then I saw them in Chicago at a Virgin Records signing, and I heard they were playing House of Blues, and it was like a private show. And that was when they were wearing like whatever, they're trying to make them dress like medieval times and shit. You know what I mean? It was just like,
right.
You just see they were drinking a bottle of wine a day, being like, okay, next town, next city. Like, right. And then on the Millennium New Year's Eve, they had picked up that new keyboard dude, and he was with some chick, and he's sitting right behind me on the train down in New York. It was just like, we've crossed paths at strange times where I've seen them try and just shift with what the trend was. And now they don't really have any sound to go off of where, and this, I don't want to sound trite by any means because I love it, is you've got your sound pretty much wired for your fan base of Lowest of the Low. Right. Whether it's that subversive lead in with the guitar that's now on track 7 on not a Jit Pop of the album before it, Something to Believe in.
Yeah.
Like it's 16 seconds. It's the riff that sets the tone. It's just missing the harmonica, but it's so familiar and so structured of like, I know what I want, and here it is in a new way. And here's the lamenting song, and here's the strong, something to pick us up. Like the structure of the album and what people want to feed with your lyrical content is absolutely a great go-to that they don't have. They don't have the ability to do that now because of the compromises they made early on.
Right.
Is there anything that you absolutely loathe playing now? Like whether it's from yours, like when what's coming up, that like just because of how many 30 years of playing the same song?
No, in fact, you were at the only for that run, which was 5 days, and I made that stupid proud statement at one series of them that I would not play any song twice. Yeah. So it became 5 days. So I played 120 songs over 5 days, no covers, or I might have jumped into one cover, whatever, but basically no covers and no repeats. So, I better not be sick of them because I had to play 120 of them. But no, actually, at this point, there were times, I think just when the Low broke up and I was trying to crawl out from under the fact that I had just been in a very super big band, and now I had another band or doing solo stuff. And it was like, well, now I have to somehow grab you by the lapels and make you, if not forget my old band, at least I can slap you long enough that you forget them for a second so you can hear these new songs without all kinds of nostalgia. I think that's a bit of a problem for us now, is that I've said to people before, when they talk about comparing such and such a record to Shakespeare in My Butt or whatever, it's like, well, this record over here that we just released with all these new songs, I might think these songs are better than the ones on Shakespeare in My Butt. But the point is, the people who grew up with Shakespeare in My Butt, like, this record has to compete with the fact that they were 17 or they were 18 or they had no responsibilities. They were in a bar, they got laid that night, and then they met their life partner, or they, whatever they did, they had an epiphany about something in their life and everything. Like, and now they're sort of settled in their lives. They have kids, they got a babysitter to come to the show. Like, it's a lot harder for this record to be as sexy as that record was. Sure. When they had no responsibilities and their life was, just laid out.
That was holding a pint of beer in the air. That's the Irish and English bar pub sound that you have, like all that is built in there. So now the nostalgia, and I think you nailed that with Sordid Fiction. To me, that's your masterpiece. And if I had to pick a sound to go back to and like build off of, I think you had wrapped everything up nicely there. Everything after that is epilogue, in my opinion.
That's not a commonly held.
They weren't listening. They weren't listening as clearly as they should have. They need to go back out on the road and put the albums on in order, and they'll get it. From Winter Sleepers to Dark Horse, all the stuff on there. It reminds me of different times in my life because I was in Chicago there, and you can feel that if you're talking about the people who were the bar hookups in 95 and having that great time. Sordid Fiction is them at 36 to 45 looking back on baseball cards in the spokes,
Right.
the Saturday afternoon, 1972, all that is right there. So it really takes me on the journey where I came through in comedy and then would take off to, even driving to Chicago. I got to go through Buffalo. I'm going to put on Tragically Hip and Lowest of the Low just when I'm in that area, because
Right.
it's just the nostalgia that we have there. And I'm happy to be part of that bubble, because even past Syracuse, where I live now, they won't play Tragically Hip. They won't play you guys. Like they won't even know. I don't know why it's such a best kept secret, but it's so nice to have something that, like, because we have the underground. We're like, oh, I knew about them before they sold out, went big, Tenacious D or whatever. That's the thing for me back in the day. And here's you guys keeping it wholesome and pure. That's one thing that hasn't been tarnished in our lives by commercial fuckery, I think.
Right. Oh, great. Well, I'm glad.
How about women's names? You get a lot of mileage out of women's names. From Genevieve to Caroline, Carolina to Saskia to Imogene, Sister Jude now is kind of your opus to the women's movement, to feminism, and being a dad yourself of obviously a bright young female who's ready to be right down on the front lines of any fight. So definitely, how is that played in? I know you had talked, in some of your monologues in between songs about your aunts and your mother and whatnot, as it being kind of a tribute to them as well.
Yeah, well, I guess on one hand it's funny because it sort of subverts the idea that in rock and roll it seems to be like women's names are pretty common fodder for male songwriters to use to write love songs with. And but of course the history of male rock stars and their wokeness maybe is not particularly good. So I think, I'm not sure, I certainly didn't set out consciously to do this, but I think looking at all these women's names, I think part of it was that I grew up considering myself kind of an ally to women, and as a leftist and as a self-described feminist as a man, I feel like, I've always considered that women were my comrades and my colleagues and my peers and my, so I think when I write a song that uses a woman's name like Genevieve, I think it's quite clear that I'm on Genevieve's side in that song.
Sure.
And, and then something that's maybe just more even, I mean, Sister Jude is pretty polemic in its talking about the women's issue, whereas those other ones, I think it's woven in there as like, just, you would know that I'm an ally. Right. And there's a funny story because I met a woman who, is now married, but she was considered herself bisexual. But in the day, 91, 92, she considered herself a lesbian, and she had all these lesbian friends, and she said she would make all these mixtapes. And she said the funny thing, it was like Ani, and it was like Indigo Girls, and it was like basically all, lesbian folk artists. And she said, and Lowest of the Low. She said there was always a Lowest of the Low song on her mixtapes. And she said her friends would always be going, "What's up with this band?" And she was like, "Well, you have to see them. You can't get it from this." But she told me that we were always on their mixtapes. So she said, then one night we were playing Lee's Palace or something, and she brought a whole bunch of her friends down. And she said when she left, one of her friends turned to her and said, "You know what? You're right. He's better than lesbians." So for a while we were joking about we should make a T-shirt that says "Lowest of the Low, better than lesbians." But we thought, maybe if you don't know the story and you're not inside that,
yeah, you think you would have learned from the first T-shirt decision, Ron.
Yeah. But I think that we've always had that sort of weird scenario, which is that you come to our show, and certainly there's a lot of, I don't know if it'd be testosterone, but there's a lot of energy flying at the Lowest of the Low show. It's all boys on stage, and and of course when we got some radio play, then you had all the bros down front with the backward baseball caps, and we didn't know how we had accumulated them, but there they were. So I could see you easily walking into a Lowest of the Low show and going, "Oh God, it's just another bunch of fucking guys jumping around with their cocks out." But somehow it was always readable that we were allies, I think. So
yeah, with a 4-bar guitar riff, you can change. I've seen you change a crowd like that plenty of times, where it's not an intimate setting, where it needs to come down and tame, and music tames a savage beast of them wanting to do the angry, the hooligan, the soccer hooligan type feel stuff.
Yeah.
you take it down and they're right into it, crying in their beers to over Subversive. Like, you can get them with Black Monday. It's whatever you want to go to.
And we used to have to stop the show. You know, one thing we had learned from the Clash, which I always loved, was that, and we did the same thing, which is that we'd be rocking out, and we would often give some people, you know, give them some rope, right? Not to use another Clash reference, but like, you know, chastise somebody, or, you know, make some friendly comments. Hey guys, up and down, you know, not like this, because there's a bunch of little people in the front that don't want to get killed. And we would let that go for a while. But if it got really, really bad, we would do the same thing that I had heard the Clash did, which would be like mid-song, we'd be like, stop the band. We would have this guy thrown out and then right back into the song, you know. And it's like, because we always wanted, you know, our dance floor to sort of be a mirror of the band to some degree. You know, you can't totally control that, but it's like, you know, and just, we were talking about New York last couple of weeks ago. We went to see Billy Bragg. He threw somebody out of the show just because, same thing. He gave the guy like 3 strikes, and then he just said, can we have this guy taken out? Because he was just menacing everybody around him. And, you know, it's like,
I remember I was at the Just dancing. This is just a sidebar organically that I have to, a memory that came back. My brother and I saw you at the Trough, and there was a guy there who was, you know, had some mental disability, but he was in the zone, man. And he was doing like the you couldn't get near him because you would just catch a backhand to the face, like dance.
right.
But like, you know, there might have been some Buffalo Bros looking, laughing and pointing, but me and my brother just stood back and we're like, this guy is you just had to witness it, like him loving something so much and like letting himself go, man. So like I can just call for the lowest of the low dance, and my brother will do it now after that. You know, I won't do it here because it takes a lot. It takes a lot of space. I'll be knocking shit off the walls. But that was that. If there is an official dance, I'll make Jeremy Smith learn it, and then he can perform it at the next show.
I'm sure he knows it. And he does it in the kilt.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So now you've extended your hand, and I want to give some times. I saw them at your show. They did a little harmony with you. You're producing a new album. You want to tell us about that right now?
I do. You know what? My computer's gonna go. So how about you hum 15 seconds of your favorite Low song, and I grab my charger.
Well, our hearts are only 22, but our souls 105. And there's a railway runs between the two, like the freight trains of our lives. We tug at time like ragged sleeves. Nowadays we wear them thin.
Put me on the job.
Scatter them like pumpkin seed. Hold breath into the wind.
All right, nice.
Mm.
Has that ever happened on your show before? Somebody had to...
I've stole that song, so I owe you royalties. But your next line in that, I think, is your pinnacle line that sticks out to me more than any line that you've ever written. And it took a while to get there. Well, you know, I don't believe in God, but I believe in you, from the road down which we both have trod to the nights that you pulled me through. And you scream love like a battle cry, but you shine love like a light. And you got that look in your eye, but there won't be no talking tonight. Dude, that God line, and you know, our heart's only 22, but our soul's 105, resonates with me. Playing a Muslim extremist, a former Christian turned atheist, someone who's trying to drive home a political message of military industrial complex, fake media, conspiracy theory, anti-establishment, just to wake people up.
Right.
That's what you said in that line is at the heart of what I really am, surrounded by character. And
right.
that shit sticks to me like glue. So,
well, that's the thing, right? That's I keep mentioning Billy Bragg and the Clash and people like this is like, I remember, I would tell people that I remember going to see Billy Bragg when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And I would see him, he came every summer. I'd see him every summer in Toronto, and it was the first few records. And I just remember, you know, the thing that stuck with me was that when I went to see his shows, I would say like it was like he was shot out from a cannon from backstage, or like he was doing jumping jacks backstage, like Henry Rollins or something, push-ups. And he would fly out just a guy with a guitar, not singing that well, not playing the guitar that well, but sending this incredible wave of energy and message to people. And the major message, whether you want to buy his socialism aspect, I don't think those are his best songs. I think his best songs are his romantic songs. Mm-hmm. And but whatever, the whole ball is selling you this idea that we're in this boat together, we're on this raft together, and we got to take care of each other, and we got to look after each other. and we got to be good to each other. And when I left, I would say, you know, when you left those, we walk out into the summer into Toronto out of those shows, it was not about, you know, fuck, when's Billy Bragg coming back? When's his next record? It was about, you left there going like, I want my band to be the best band that's ever lived, or, you know, and other people, not people just in music or whatever, if they were dog walkers, I want to be the best dog walker. Those dogs are going to get walked, man, like, you know, tomorrow. It's like you just left there with this incredible energy. And I think that's the greatest thing you can give somebody, is a sense of not being alone, and the sense of energy, like just to give what humans can give each other, is this sort of incredible energy to get out and get stuff done.
Do you know a bit about improvisation at all, or no?
My daughter has taken some improv. She's really into improv, and
okay.
She loves sketch comedy, and she's quite a character. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I think I probably know about improv like I know about music, which is that, you know, I'm in a van with a bunch of jokers all the time, and there's a lot of improv going on, but nobody's trained, right?
Right. Well, it's a yes and lifestyle, because we say no but as humans, and why to question things. So to say yes and then add that on there, you know, is just that mentality that brings everybody together in an ensemble. And, you know, whether it's the low for you to be able to come back home or go and do production now, I'm interested to see that mentality cross over. But I definitely wanted to give them some time, and you know, even down the road to highlight their music on my media platform.
Copper and Iron, you're talking about Copper and Iron?
Yeah. I always want to call them Iron and Silk, which is a kung fu movie that my English teacher made us watch back in the day about wushu. But sorry, Copper and Iron.
Right. Apparently, if they were Iron and Silk, it wouldn't be the way you think. Apparently, Sarah Jade is the one who has all the tools, and Tom is the one who does all the cooking. So, not the cooking is Silk, but you know what I'm saying.
Right on.
Yeah, no, I met those guys by accident in Sarah contacted me about Tom turning 40, and she said, "Do you ever do private shows?" And I was like, "Well, it depends what it is," and blah blah blah. So she said, "Yeah, you know, my partner's turning 40, and he's a huge fan, and we're both fans, and it'd be awesome if we could get you to come and play the show." So we worked out a situation where that could work and everything, and I was getting ready for that show. And about, I want to say maybe a week before it happened, she sent me an email and said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to mention it's going to be in a barn. It's in a barn in Beamsville." And I was like, "Oh, cool! Like that sounds awesome." And but I was picturing barn. I was picturing hay bales and manure, right? And I thought, well, that'll be cool. And so I show up, and it's this insane, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, chitty chitty bang bang kind of barn. Like this guy Ryan, who owns this barn, and he's a magical dude. He's a contractor by day, and he's a collector of antiquities, and he's got all these old diesel cans, and the whole thing is very curated. There's a Model T pickup truck in there that he works on, and so it was a total magical experience. And then I finished that and came back, and I think they had come to an Only show, and they, you know, about a year later, they said, "We're going to make a record. We're musicians, and we've made records before. We're going to make a record, and we wonder if you produce." And I was like, "Hell's yeah, I produce." And so then we went down that path, and we negotiated what that would be like. I had heard some songs, and I thought, wow, this is fantastic. The songs I got from them were, they often play as a folk duo, like an acoustic duo. About what they wanted to do was fill it out with more band stuff, and we even talked about some horns and some strings and stuff like that. So we were doing that. And then it was like, well, what should we do? Should we come up to Toronto and go to? They knew that I had recorded at Revolution Recording and Union Sound and stuff like that. And I said, we got to do it in the barn, right? And they were like, in the barn, like seriously, in the barn? And I was like, yeah, we'll get an interface, we'll get some mics, we'll do it in the barn, like guerrilla style. It's going to be amazing, right? And this long story leads to my overall philosophy about making records, is that I said, you know, I guarantee if we make it in that barn, because we met in that barn, you know, the first bit of magic between us happened in that barn. The barn is magical in and of itself. I said, I guarantee you that what we might lose from control or from sound, you know, classic audio engineer sound capabilities, we will gain 1,000-fold in vibe and the fact that we'll be having a blast. You know, you can always hear if the band is having a ball, right, through the speakers, right? Like you can't mic that. It's just, it's out here, right? So
that's what's going to be important on that new 4-track recording that you're doing too, right? You got to get it all in there, dude.
It better be there, because if it's not, then you just have a shitty medium.
Right.
So we did. So we made it at the barn, and it was, you know, my mom said to me, she's like, were you sure this was going to work? And I was like, you know, an hour into day one, my shoulders dropped, and I was like, okay, good. You know, yes, this is going to work, right? I knew it would work on some level, but I didn't know it was going to be like over the center fence, vibey and fun, you know. And it was like, I think every day we went in there, we wound up doing like 13 songs. We tracked 13 songs in about 9 days, and I'm talking about full band, horns, strings, everything, right? And it was just because it was sort of effortless, and there was no hassles, and there was no negativity. There wasn't a single clock in there. You couldn't look at a clock if you wanted to, so we didn't clock watch at all. And it was just, you know, and you know, I have to add that they're also super talented, so it's like that is a big. That's
absolutely. I mean, their harmonies are great, and that's what I'm excited about because, and no offense to them by any means, but when I was just hearing them together, I was like, all right, I get it. But if that's what the whole thing's going to be, and I said to myself, I go, man, I would love if Ron brought in Alex McMaster to do strings, or you know, I've seen him on the New Year's Eve show that you had there with the horn section. So I'm not sure if it's the same musicians, but you know, with your connections,
a lot of some Steven, who played trumpet on Agipop, is on it.
Okay.
Lee Rose, who plays in the DJ, she plays bass in the DJ with me, but she plays violin on it as well. And Jody Bermel, who's the drummer for the DJ, he's the drummer. And yeah, just super. It was a super cool experience, and it reinforced my belief that nothing really in life is, well, I mean, brain surgery is brain surgery, rocket science is rocket science, but most other things aren't rocket science. And you know, if you bring a healthy attitude to it and you demystify it a little bit, and if you keep, I always say, you know, like it's not the first most important thing isn't having fun. The first most important thing is making a good record. But 1A is having fun. You know, sure. It's not number 5 and it's not number 10. It's 1A. It's part of it's attached to number 1. Because I made a couple records that were not great experiences, and it literally taints the way you hear it. And you know, I have some records that I have such beautiful memories attached to that, you know, it's a kind of gift that the people I worked with gave me and that I gave myself, which is that on my deathbed, I'll probably think about some of those records, and it'll be part of the thing that makes me realize that my life was worth living, you know?
Well, it's you're talking about artistic integrity, and that's a very rare thing coming through the 90s, where anything that was even you know, left on the bone was going to be hoarded out by the 2000s, you know, in that renaissance. So that to be able to hold on to that, that's the inspiration. Because in my line of work is wrestling, you can get real disgruntled because, you know, there's maybe 100 TV spots and there's 15,000 wrestlers. Right. Even if you're there and you have your opportunity, it's about who you know and who's your dad and who's your, you know, third generation, and
sure,
who you have heat with by association. So to be like, all right, even if you don't make it to like walk out on that one stage, I've got to have plenty of moments that I'll look back on and on my deathbed too, whether it's working with like Sergeant Slaughter, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Roddy Piper. Like,
right.
Sure, I didn't get to do it at WWE, but I know, and they told me I'm good enough as well. Like, if you're looking for validation as an artist, like we all are for the megalomania reasons, you know, like, all right, I can swing bats with the best who ever did it and get their respect. If it didn't,
you didn't get to be in the Beatles, but you got to be in Wings.
Exactly. And do you think that is well, now that we're on Russo brand, now that you brought it up, Vince Russo, the greatest WWE writer of all time, as really into the Beatles conspiracy of Paul and Paul McCartney. Do you believe that Paul was dead and they replaced him with you know, the lookalike?
What I know that conspiracy exists.
Yeah.
It's mathematically pretty improbable.
I don't know. There's
but, okay, can I just leave it at, or sure. Can we I'll push to the very forefront that somehow they found a guy that not only looks exactly like Paul, but had the legs that Paul might have had. I mean, because when is this supposed to have happened? Like after Eleanor Rigby and stuff like that, or before yesterday on?
I'd see, now I'm not the Beatles aficionado like he is to get the timeline and the songs right, but I know as a conspiracy guy, there's all the clues from the album. There's his wife afterwards saying things that are not like in line with what she should be saying, and we're shut down with that. Other timeline things don't match up, and even the way he plays guitar is different. I've been pushing.
I play guitar now is different than I played in Lost of the Low early on too. So maybe
okay. Hey, I'm down for all conspiracy. Well, I believe Dave Chappelle may be a clone as well. So there's plenty of Illuminati things going on, which you not selling out may have saved you from having to join the Illuminati and being a blood sacrifice and ended up being a clone, cranking out shitty music that I wouldn't want to listen to. So I'm happy you're not. See what you avoided. So,
well, you're welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Another thing I wanted to cover that I'm excited about is this Weakerthans tribute album.
Right.
Yeah. Can you give us any stooge report, or is it super tight-lipped on that?
No, I don't think it's that tight-lipped. I think there have been some leaks already from Mike, who put it together. It's called I think it's called One Great Tribute.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I just got a cold call from a guy named Mike Robichaux, who said he was putting this together, and all he had to say was what Weakerthans trip, and I was like, I'm in, tryptophan. Well, I don't know what you're going to say next, but I'm in. It was so making this tribute record, and the proceeds going to mental health causes in Winnipeg.
Okay.
Which is up John Sampson's alley and the whole Weakerthans crew's alley out there helping people. So we just I said, can I do the song Pamphleteer? And he said, yeah, it's yours. So then after that, we were playing around with Sky Wallace band, and she's a massive, I think the Weakerthans are her favorite band ever. So she's a massive fan. I said, hey, we could probably hook you up with Mike. He's looking for, quality people to make tributes. And I said, the only thing you can't do is you can't do Pamphleteer. And she said, oh, that's the best song. And I said, I know, that's why I chose it. That was off limits. So we just in a day, we just went in and knocked out, like I kind of knocked out I thought, what the thing about I think of the Weakerthans a little bit like, I mean, this is a weird thing to say, but a little bit like the Ramones in terms of like, I feel like over the 4 or 5 records, the sound doesn't change very much. It's sort of a similar, to the point where I actually, sometimes I have a hard time remembering which songs are on which records. And this is just to say the strong suit is that John's lyrics and vocal is always like right up front, because I think that is, I consider him the greatest lyricist in Canada, if not beyond Canada. I won't say the world because that's crazy, and I won't say of all time. I mean, I just said it, but he's a fantastic lyric writer and thinker. And what I love about listening to his lyrics is he's like, I consider myself a very good lyricist as well, but we write in slightly different ways. And there are some things that he does like a chess player that I'm not sure I could do, which is that I've seen him set up. I see him set up
to me because I said earlier, aside from Lowest of the Low and you, the other thing I mark out for huge is WuTang Clan. I'm a huge, and everything they do is chess boxing and chess moves, and that's how they do their rhymes in and out, and that's how I model a lot of my artistry off of both of you and the RZA and the way that you guys think. And it's interesting that you say that. Now, I was just talking to TJ, and I had to put him over as the best improviser, and I think the best actor on the planet since Daniel Day-Lewis retired. But he didn't want to put it over. I'm glad you put Weakerthans over. He's great, but you're better. You're the best, and I'll fight.
Well, this is what I love about art, and about music. If I feel like, and this is not, of course, to blow my own horn, but just to say, like I've often said to some people who get in discussions about fighting over this band and that band, and I'm like, really, are we in a place where we have to, like, aren't we lucky to have these?
Yeah, it's such a nice problem to have. Yeah,
splitting hairs like that. But as I was going to say about John, and as you're saying about Wu-Tang, is like the chess game of like how I've seen John set up a line that will take 4 more lines before the kind of, not even, I don't want to say the punchline, but the kind of the resolution happens 4 lines later, just in a way that I don't see it coming, and then I'm like, that he could do that. And it's just sort of a mental, it's just sort of, it would be like 2 different athletes having a different way to do something. But so anyway, I'm a huge fan of his. And so what I thought when we were asked to do this thing is that, I'm not my default setting is if you're going to cover somebody, try and make it different than the original, or else why are you covering it? But especially in a situation with, as I say, because the Weakerthans sound is so manicured, like they know exactly what their sound is. I wanted to do something different than that. So we wound up creating this kind of ska version of Pamphleteer.
Oh, cool.
Something I know they would never do, right? So I thought, well, this will be cool because it'll be totally different. And Sky did something pretty wildly different as well. And then I heard a song, I won't say who it is, but I heard one of the leaks of the first songs, and it was such a slavish recreation of the song, and that I had exactly that reaction, which was like, why I know how hard it is to record and to go into a studio and time it takes. Why would you do that, to do kind of an exact duplicate?
There's a couple good covers of Civil Twilight online that are different, you know, but aside from that, there's not too much out there. And it's not that their stuff is technically super hard, but I think there's a lot of room harmony wise to really either speed something up from them or slow it down. There's things like, I don't know if I would even mess with I Hate Winnipeg, or, you know what I mean? That's something like that's so iconic for them, you know.
Well, my partner's from Winnipeg, and she's like, you can't even sing that song unless you're from Winnipeg. That's the thing. And you know, and not to put too fine a point on it, but I feel like it's like covering Woody Guthrie or something like that. Like maybe some people are afraid to cover Weakerthans songs because John's thing, you know, those ideas and those words are so hardwired to him as a guy that maybe, you know, your average singer-songwriter doesn't want to go, well, I'm gonna do that, because it's like, you know, it's sort of like Bob Marley or something. It's like, you know, he's not just a singer. Like John's not just a guy who wrote some songs. He's like, it's a thing, you know, like it's an entity. So maybe people are intimidated or something. I don't know, but yeah.
Drinking Kool-Aid out of the cup of Christ and then just be like not washing it or something. I'm excited for that project, man. I love that you all are coming together to honor somebody, and even in your songs and clap for the Weakerthans. I mean, you're even honoring them in your own tunes, man, to like bring that community together more than the split hairs. It is a great problem for us to have. I wanted to kind of get a little what we call in wrestling shooty with it, bang bang, and you know, get your thoughts on bands that I don't want to say have overshadowed you. I'll put the heat on myself. Bands I like, something terrible happens to them or they break up. The Weakerthans, Bare Naked Ladies, Old Dirty Bastard dies, Gord Downey Jr. dies, Stephen Stanley leaves Lowest of the Low. Like I feel like it's all on me. So anybody that I truly like, your band is fucked in one way or another. Either they're going to break up or somebody's going to die in them. So I apologize in advance. But, you know, with how they honored Gord at the end with, you know, the concert across Canada, super classy and whatnot. But you played a lot of shows with Tragically Hip. Was it tough for you, or has it been throughout the decades to be, even as an independent artist, opening or working with the Hip or Bare Naked Ladies or being in that vein and being overshadowed? Or was there ever any bullshit ego wise where you're kind of fighting for your corner of Toronto? Like, fuck you, we have Kensington markets. No, we're Kensington Market. Like we're the over by the only, and they're over on the other side of the arena. Was there ever any question jealousy?
We did have our gang sign of.
Did you have
LO?
I like it. Nice. There you go.
There is a Kensington. You got it. Yeah. So, no, I mean, you know, this comes full circle back to what we started talking about in the beginning. Is maybe if you had asked me this question, maybe if I could foresee the future when I was 17 and you'd asked me that question when I hadn't quite, you know, the sediment hadn't sifted down as to what I actually wanted to do as an artist, I might have gone like, oh, fuck that. Yeah. And like, I wrote this song and I wrote that, you know, like I've read a couple things. When I read about Drake putting Toronto on the map, or I read about, or some people could, you know, Broken Social Scene or stuff like that. It's like, it's true and it's not true. Of course it's true that they did. Drake has way huger reach than I do. So of course he put Toronto on the map in a way I could never do. But just that, to think back in 1991 when nobody else was doing that, we were doing it, you know, just like, again, to mention John with Winnipeg, like, you know, if 10 years from now somebody goes, well, you know what, they were the first ones to put Winnipeg on the map, I would have to go, excuse me, there's a guy from, you know. So every now and then a little tweak like that happens where I go, you know, or as you said, like when we released Sordid Fiction, you know, we mentioned the Weakerthans because I at the time had sort of felt I had kind of discovered them for my group of people in Toronto, and was super pumped about them, and did what I do, which is I write about things I'm super pumped about. And we had made a couple of, Rusty Nails had made a couple of records with Ian Blurton in Toronto, and we had made them at Chemical Sound. And then after that, the Weakerthans sort of blew up, and then they made Left and Leaving, I think, at Chemical Sound with Ian Blurton. So some interviewers were critiquing sort of fiction. They were like, oh, these guys, these older guys are, they're dropping the Weakerthans name. They even recorded their record at. So it was like cart before the horse, which is like, I didn't want to be that guy and write a letter to the editor. The reason the Weakerthans made the record there is because I told them about Ian, about Chemical Sound. But so some of that stuff happens, and that's totally fine with me because it's water off my back. But the bigger question of that is that I really put it down to, like, when I think about my career, do I feel blessed? Do I feel screwed? Do I feel like I got the short end of the stick? I look at it and go, I'm playing to a community of people that widely respect my work, are waiting for the new work, that I've built a communion with, that, and maybe even more important than this, have built a communion with each other, like this whole Graffiti Nation thing we talk about, where they come to the Only, and it's like people have created relationships. There's a Facebook site called Political Hate Watch, which a lot of our people in Graffiti Nations have gotten involved in, to keep an eye on the far right and stuff like that with each other. And, all that stuff has come out of me deciding to pick up a guitar and write some songs, or part of it has come out of that. So, I look at it and it's like, I never got into this so that I could have a psychedelic painted Rolls Royce, or have a giant mansion and drink Jim Beam in my swimming pool. So it doesn't really bug me, because that's the stuff that's attached to that. Not to say that Gordon, those guys, were into that either, but I'm saying, like, deciding who's where on the popularity list comes from that world in my mind. And it's like, I come back to people like The Clash, where I, read a biography about those guys, and when I think, oh, they were massive, and of course they got all over the world. Their reach was much farther than mine. But when I find out that London Calling was 28th on the Billboard lists or whatever, it's like they never really got the kind of due I think a band like that should get, and some of the same reasons. So I feel like if you're going to choose that avenue, then you don't complain about that avenue after you've walked down it. Like this laneway smells like piss. It's like, you chose to walk down that laneway, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. It's being in the locker room. I think about that. I was at the one show at the Pier in Buffalo where it got rained out, and then it was the redo, and then it rained again. And you guys got clipped to like 15, 20 minutes. And I had just come off a wrestling show. I'm probably carrying my own baggage here, but some dumb shit happened. And I was like, what the fuck, dude? That's all we get? And I could just picture you backstage looking at Gord being like, dude, what the fuck, man? You're that over? You got to take that much? I wonder how much professional jealousy, locker room bullshit, like in passing, of who's more over and who had to bow down to who because they're in the main event. But again, that could just me be applying my wrestling politics to the life of rock and roll, because you might, because old bitter performers might have go, fuck it, 20 minutes, we get paid the same way. I don't care. Let's get off stage.
Well, the thing is, the busker in me too is always the guy who goes like, I kind of love being in the underdog position anyway. And it's like, I think I might have told this story at the Only when you were there, but I'm not sure, which was that when I was in the Rusty Nails, we went out west, and there's a classic thing where Vancouver, people who grew up in Vancouver, everybody in Canada kind of hates Toronto, because it's the, where most of the culture business happens, and a lot of the business happens. There's a lot of money in Toronto. So a lot of people outside Toronto hate Toronto. So we were playing in Vancouver, opening for Spirit of the West, which was a very big band in Canada, and their hometown people in Vancouver. And so that we were opening, nobody was listening to the band, and they were basically just waiting for Spirit of the West to come on. And so at some point I said, hey, Vancouver, don't hate us because we're from Toronto and we're beautiful. And then suddenly a hail of drinks, right? They were throwing drinks.
You get the heel heat, baby.
Like, and I look at Lawrence, and Lawrence goes like this, and I go, now they're listening, right? So I the sort of street scrapper and the busker in me loves to be in that position, and I'll probably love that no matter how old I get. So, a little bit of that is cool for me too, because like you get to poke people and
Sure, man. Well, you would love then. Hey, if you want to come out and do a wrestling show, you would love that shit. I'll put you in the right spot at the right time, man, for sure. You're always welcome there. And it's always, there's the first rule of wrestling. You put heat on your heel and you make your baby face off your heel. So you getting heel heat early on got that other band over even bigger when they hit the stage before they even strum the first note on the guitar. They were made, dude. So you did them a favor. So they owe you part of the merch cut on that. My last question, is it okay for Hamin Media to use the Lowest of the Low catalog for intro and outro music?
The entire catalog, yeah. But the catch is you have to use the entire catalog.
Well, 120 songs will not be repeated, you guys, because I know them all. I love them all. And dude, you've been such a huge impact and inspiration in my 30 years as a performer. You've been in the background, taking me across this country, north, south, east, and west, and you'll continue to do that. And I'm forever grateful and appreciative for you being in my life and your art, dude.
Well, my pleasure, man. Thanks.
Is there any place we can find you, buy tickets, plug, promote? Agit pops out now, you guys. Where do you want to send them to follow? Let's build this following, man.
Yeah, you can just if you go to lowestofthelow.com, there's lots of direction to send you where you need to go if you want low products, or you can go to ronhawkins.com. You'll get the same sort of thing and some other little alleys you can go down. Some of them smell like piss. But I've got a band called the Do Good Assassins, as you know. We're just about to finish up a 4-track cassette record we're making on a Tascam 246 from 1985, which is the first multi-track recorder I had when I was a kid, and that's what I first started writing songs on. So we thought, hey, let's make a record on that, see what we can do. We might even release some cassettes.
That would be awesome, man. The purple tape returns you guys to the streets of Toronto as we get it out here. Once again, if you're down with the low lifes, then you're the lowest of the low, because here at HahaHamin.podbean.com, it's all independent artists all the time, infidels. Ron Hawkins, king of the low lifes. YOLO. Hamin.